This is With the First Pick, the CBS Sports NFL Draft Podcast. I'm Ryan Wilson. That, of course, is Rick Spielman. And today we are joined by the man who was drafted by Rick, former Vikings tight end Kyle Rudolph, team second-round pick back in 2011, a two-time Pro Bowler, now a broadcaster for Peacock and Fox Sports. And he's joining us on behalf of Medtronic and their Blue Balloon Challenge. We'll get to that in a few minutes. Kyle, thanks for your time. And how excited are you to be reunited with the man who laughed at his own jokes, Rick Spielman?
I'm extremely excited to be on. I'm curious, I see you guys are giving grades out all the time, after 12 years, what grade you would give Rick, Ryan, for his draft pick back in 2011.
Well, one of our colleagues gives him a really hard time about the first round pick in that draft, but the second round pick was that's an A+. And I think there's no doubt about that. Let me ask you this quickly, Kyle, because this is one of the things that
we don't give out pluses on my podcast, even though it's not my podcast. I'm just solid A.
Before we get going, Kyle, let me ask, because Rick and I were at the Combine last year and we did the pro day circuit and all that. And one of the things I found out about him is that he is not afraid to ask awkward questions to the kids, the college players, as they're coming through the process. Did you have any awkward interactions in terms of questions Rick asked you that you're like, okay, who is this guy and why is he asking me these questions?
No, I felt like Rick and I always had a great relationship, and obviously that built over time. I feel like as a young kid, for me, I was 21. I left Notre Dame a year early. I met with the Vikings at the Combine. We had the train station interviews where it's 15 minutes, the buzzer goes off, you go to the next one. And I remember when Rick called in 2011, early in the second round, I was like, Minnesota, they have 3 tight ends. Like, what do they need me for? So, people have their own draft stories, and mine was certainly one. As I looked down the draft board with the next few picks, Minnesota was not one of the teams I thought I was going to. And now, 12 years later, you can't imagine it happening any other way. And I think over Rick and I's 10 years together, I got to know him really, really well. And, it's just fortunate when you're in one place, as long as I was there, you build really close relationships with people. And I think when you look at the roster that Rick built over that 10-year period, it was just quality individual and exceptional football player, one after the next after the next. And I think that's why we had the success that we had over the course of that 10 years.
All right, Rick, you want to compose yourself and take a moment, because that was a pretty nice thing that the college just said about you.
Yeah, one, that he's retired, so I don't have to worry about a contract extension and dealing with his agents.
Come on.
But 2, he was one of the players, just like Harrison Smith from Notre Dame, who we already knew the character. We already knew the background. There were no concerns whatsoever with that. We knew what type of football player he was. Usually when you do these 15-minute interviews, I didn't spend much time asking questions. It was more when the coaches come in and they start talking a little bit about football. He was one of those 15 minutes and done, and then put him in the drawer, and we won't talk about him again until we get to draft day. And a lot of that has to do at times because there's so much smoke screen going on before the draft. And guys that we knew we wanted, that we were going to take, and people that didn't even think that we needed that position, we weren't going to pass up not only great football players, but great human beings. And that starts right there with Kyle Rudolph. And Harrison Smith, I don't think we even talked to till after we saw him at the Senior Bowl. I never talked to him again till we called him on draft day. But those are the type that are easy decisions, because you don't have to worry about anything. You know what they're going to come in and be a professional football player, act professionally on and off the field, become leaders in the community. And Kyle Rudolph not only checked all the boxes on the field, it probably kept me in a job for another 10 years, but also checked all the boxes off the field as well.
So Kyle paid for your house, not the other way around. Is what I'm hearing. Is that right?
No, I don't make the same money that Kyle did probably in his career. As you know, that I'm partially homeless. I'm unemployed.
Oh, my God. The stories I had to listen to, Kyle. He's trying to rub 2 nickels together. That's another one.
2 nickels together.
Yeah.
So I should mention this, by the way. Go ahead, Kyle.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Ryan.
I was just going to say, before we get too far into this, you played 10 seasons in Minnesota, which you mentioned. You had 453 catches for 4,448 yards and 48 touchdowns, which are incredible accomplishments. And you played a few more years after that, of course, after you left Minnesota. But I just want to make sure we had that on the record. And I'll ask you quickly. It's sort of a hokey question, but I looked it up because I was curious. Do you know all the quarterbacks you caught touchdown passes from in Minnesota? Do you remember?
Yeah, I mean, and I could certainly go into all the quarterbacks that I played with as well. Maybe not caught touchdown passes from that. That list is even more extensive. So
That's why I'm sitting here doing.
We certainly went
right now.
We certainly went through some quarterbacks when I was there. But I will say this, and it was one thing we knew as players, and I think it was never more evident than in 2016, where we drafted Teddy a couple years prior, last pick of the first round, and he was our guy. 2016 was going to be a huge year for Teddy. It was kind of the first year where offensively we took the keys to the car and gave them to Teddy, and it was like, hey, this is your offense now. It's no longer Adrian Peterson. And although Adrian was still a great player, it was Teddy's time. And the injury that he suffered in training camp that year was so unfortunate and tragic for not only Teddy personally, but for his career. But from the front office side and from the organization side, you knew that they were going to do everything possible for us to go win games. And we had a really, really good football team. And that's when we traded for Sam Bradford 2 weeks before the season started. And it was, you knew the organization was going to give us every opportunity to win. It would have been, easy for them to save that first round pick, try to go out there and just piece it together, win without a starting quarterback. But they're like, hey, we're going to give you guys every opportunity. And that's when we went and got Sam.
Rick, you have any follow-up to those experiences during that time? We've talked about Teddy before.
That was one thing that I thought that, and it was started with the ownership group and with everybody in the front office, George Payton, who's now the Broncos general manager, and everybody that worked with me, was that we knew we had a good football team, and we tried to do it. It was the old-fashioned way. Try to draft as many good players as you can. Those were the guys that you wanted to continue to extend and have them be, hopefully, as long as they could be a Minnesota Viking. But when you had the unfortunate incident like we had to deal with Teddy, we were too far along in the program, too good a football team, too many guys that were out there just laying, as my brother likes to say, laying body parts on the field all across this country to help the Minnesota Vikings, win games. And so we took the approach that we had to be aggressive. And I didn't care about the draft pick at the time because I knew that was our best option to give our team the best chance to win. And I think, and Kyle, you can tell me if I'm full of BS or not, at least in the locker room, they knew we were going to try to give everybody a chance to have a chance and to go out and do what we had to do to have a chance. And if we made mistakes, I made mistakes in the draft. We eventually tried to fix them and take another swing at another player. But it was never for a lack of not trying to give those guys in the locker room. Because in the end, I know that if you can assemble a bunch of great guys in that locker room that care for each other, like I think we had in Minnesota, a lot of guys never wanted to really leave, and we were able to keep that group together for a long time. We always tried to make sure from a contractual standpoint, we addressed it a year early to try to keep those guys together. But you can talk about the coaching and the game planning and the front office and all that. But what it comes down to, if you have a group of guys in that locker room that are good football players, that are high character people, that truly do care about each other, no matter the adversities you hit during the season, they're going to go out there. I'm not in that huddle. The coaches aren't in the huddle. They're going to be sitting there looking at their brothers in there and say, I want to play for that guy next to me.
Yeah, and the year after that, we drafted a pretty good second-round pick when we didn't have a first-round pick. So it was almost like we still got a first-round pick in Dalvin Cook. So it seemed like Rick and everybody else, he mentioned George Payton, but that whole group, it was like we knew year after year we were just going to get more and more good football players to go out there and have a chance.
So I'll tell this story, Kyle. Rick won't want to hear it, but that's okay. After he was let go in Minnesota, short time later, he actually came to work with us, and we were doing the draft in Las Vegas. And typically when there's a change at the top, fans are celebrating. I can tell you to a person, every single Vikings fan that walked by the set, because it was outdoors at the NFL experience, was cheering Rick, was happy to see him, said they missed him. And those conversations continue to this day. So that tells you, even though he tries to act like a tough guy and, he tries to make our producer cry at least once a week, he is genuinely a good guy. He's missed, and he did a great job in Minnesota. I'm sure he'll send me a text after this telling me he's very angry that I said those things about him, but it's true. You know it, Rick. You know it's true.
You're ruining my bad guy image on this podcast. Please, let's move on.
All right, let's talk about it. Rick and I talked about this on Tuesday, but you played with Kirk Cousins. You caught 11 touchdown passes from him, according to Wikipedia, which is almost certainly 100% true. But you played with Kirk, and you had a relationship with him. And Rick talked about this earlier, what a great person he is, how he overcomes sort of everything that's been thrown his way over the course of his career. We know about the interceptions in prime time that sort of plagued him at times, but he's been playing out of his mind the last 2 years. And for as tough as he is, to get injured the way he did, that non-contact injury is just demoralizing. But do you have any stories about Kirk? Can you tell us about Kirk, what your experiences are playing with him and the toughness that he played and what that meant to you and sort of what now this Vikings team is facing without Kirk Cousins?
Well, earlier we talked about all of the quarterbacks, and if I remember, all of the quarterbacks I played with and caught touchdowns from, I certainly do, from 2011 to 2017 or through 2017, it was a new starting quarterback week one every year. And then in 2018, we brought Kirk in free agency, and from 18 to when I left Minnesota in 3 straight years, he was the only quarterback I played with the exception of one game when Sean Mannion started a meaningless Week 17 game where we rested our starters. So I think one of the biggest things that you look at Kirk throughout his career, both in Washington and Minnesota, was just the consistency and the availability. You knew that every single Sunday he was going to be out there, and that didn't mean he was going to be 100%. Nobody plays 17 games and is 100% healthy all year, but he did the things that take care of himself. He's one of the tougher guys that I ever played with, and would be out there week in and week out. So, one of those injuries that when you're watching the game, whether live or see a replay of it, immediately, we've seen it a million times, unfortunately, with guys, and you're gutted for him. I tell people all the time that the worst part about our game is when you're injured, not being able to be out there. There's such a finite number of times that we get to go on the field. It's not like basketball. It's not hockey. It's not baseball. You don't have 82 or 162 games. We have 17 opportunities a year to go out and play. And the whole rest of the off season is preparing for those opportunities. So you're just gutted when you see something like that happen to a guy who, you mentioned he's playing as good as football as anyone at that position right now. And you hope the best for him. Ultimately, it's going to work out long term.
One quick story. I remember the first time I was out there when Kirk came in during the first OTAs and Kyle was out there, and I never heard a tight end described like this. But Kirk threw the ball to him down the seam, and Kyle had such big hands, and you never heard the ball because he had such soft hands. And he goes, geez, that's like thrown into a mattress, because you never heard the balls clinking off his hand. It was the illegal white gloves that Kyle used through most of his career, but it was amazing to see. And the one thing I knew talking to the quarterbacks is that what made Kyle so great was not only his size, but his ability, and especially in the red zone, to come up with the catches that he made and how many games he won for us just based off some of those critical catches in critical situations. Everybody can, well, not you, Ryan, but everybody can catch the ball when they're wide open. But when you're in a contested situation, it's amazing the success that Kyle's had in those situations. Before we get going, Kyle, one question I wanted to have. You played with maybe the greatest quarterback that ever played the game down in Tampa. Can you tell me what it was like to play for a Tom Brady at the end of your career? Just what made him so unique?
Well, I think you can take maybe out of that statement. I think he is far and away the best quarterback that's ever played our game, and it was really cool for me to have the opportunity. I certainly wish I would have gotten to play with him more. Oftentimes, I was watching him play and not actually out there playing with him, but just going to work every day. Seeing the way that he prepared, seeing the way that he worked, even at 40 plus years old, almost 45 years old. I had always known Tom from afar, had a relationship with him with playing for Coach Weiss at Notre Dame, and watching the Patriots film as much as we did at Notre Dame. Getting in touch and staying in touch throughout our career. When he was in New England, I was in Minnesota. And then, when I got there and actually got to be on the field with him and practice with him, nobody practiced harder than he did. And, we're kind of in a world today where, guys don't want to go practice every single day. Your older guys usually get a day off. We take care of guys. We don't wear pads as much as they used to. And, Tom never changed that old school practice mentality. Even, like I said, at his age, I don't think I've ever, maybe Kirk threw a lot of footballs during practice, but I don't know of a guy who threw more balls during practice than Tom did. He just always wanted to get more reps, always wanted to get more throws. I think that competitiveness with his work ethic is what made him the greatest quarterback to ever play our game. And it was a ton of fun for me and really cool for me to get to share one season with him.
All right, I'll ask you one more question before we get you out of here. What and Rick and I do the draft podcast, so we talk a lot about the college game and we do talk about the rookies in the NFL. But have you had an opportunity to see Brock Bowers, the tight end of Georgia? And if so, what are your thoughts on how special he looks like he's going to be?
Yeah, he's a stud. If we didn't have the rule that you have to be 3 years removed from high school to enter the draft, he would have been the first tight end taken last year and would have gone significantly higher than Kincaid did in the first round. So, I think at times, you look back at draft history. I don't know that a lot of the top 10 drafted tight ends, you could make an argument that they've not been worth it. I think back to the last three. Pitts, you can argue it's the situation, it's the offense. Hawkinson got traded. Ebron was in Detroit as well and never really panned out as a top 10 pick. But this kid certainly seems like he'd be worth that top 10 pick and more. You just watch the way that he impacts the game in so many different ways, and certainly can catch it and score at any time, which is very rare from the tight end position. Most of the time, as Rick mentioned, it's once you get in the red zone, hey, now we find our tight end, or on third downs, he's a guy that just can really do it from all over the field. And, I'm excited to watch him transition to the next level for sure.
Kyle, I know we're short on time, but can you talk a little bit about the Blue Moon Challenge and how our balloon challenge, not Blue Moon, I had that last night. I'm sorry.
Blue balloon. Trust me, it's a tough mouthful there, especially when you're bouncing a blue balloon while you're trying to say it. So at least we don't give you a blue balloon to bounce while you're saying it.
Okay, here it is. My Blue Balloon Challenge. Can you go into a little bit about your involvement and how our fans can actually help out there?
Yeah, so I've been fortunate to partner with Medtronic and the Blue Balloon Challenge, and it's something where I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, and my godmother, my dad's sister, she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at a young age, and this was 30 years ago or so, where medicine and technology was completely different. And, I remember hearing stories and talking to my aunt and the struggles that she had as a child, with her insulin shots and managing her blood sugar and just trying to be a kid, just trying to go to school, trying to play sports. So, diabetes has been something that, has been in my family my whole life with my aunt. And with November being Diabetes Awareness Month, it's really cool to see Medtronic not only spreading awareness, but raising money to make a difference and providing kids with insulin who may not otherwise be able to get it and have access to it. So, I certainly encourage all of the viewers, it's on both my Instagram and my Twitter. You can watch me try to talk while bouncing a blue balloon at the same time. And it's certainly not easy, but it is very symbolic to what people who have type 1 diabetes have to do on a daily basis and the challenges that they have to balance on a daily basis.
No, I love it. I appreciate your time. Rick, you want to have any final thoughts for Kyle before we get out of here?
No, I'm excited that he was probably our most distinguished guest that we have had on the podcast to date. And that just gives you an example of Kyle, even though he's retired now and actually doing all the broadcasting, but still the impact that he has on the community out there. And that's something not only the players like Kyle do while they're playing, but it tells you how special and the high character they have, because they continue to help where they can once they're done playing football, but still want to have an impact out there on such a great cause.
By the way, for every social post that tags at Medtronic Diabetics and use the hashtag Blue Balloon Challenge, not Blue Moon Challenge, Blue Balloon Challenge, Rick, Medtronic will donate $5 to Life for a Child, an organization that provides insulin and diabetes supplies for children and underserved communities. Kyle, this has been awesome, man. Appreciate you so much. And if you're looking to find Kyle, you can find him in Florida at what I believe he calls the house that Rick built, or you can see him on Peacock and hear him on Fox Sports Radio, where he is a broadcaster. Kyle, thanks so much, man.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate it. Rick, always good to see you.
Yep, bud. We'll talk.